update on the Supra and the TX2K prep. It is Sunday, March 7th, and this is pretty much the status of the car. So what have I accomplished so far? We have the injectors reinstalled that were cleaned and flow tested, so those are fresh. We have the fuel pump installed. Head's installed this way. This arrow used to point up and it used to read straight. However, if I flip this cover, the pump gets super tight. This is how it was shipped to me, and I'm assuming that they clearanced it with the cover on this way, so I just left it that way. The pump does feel a lot tighter, and with the cover flipped the other way, it was so tight I was a little worried, so I put it back this way. The engine bay portion is done for now. If I have time, I plan to redo the coolant overflow. This can be a little scary if you blow a head gasket or push coolant, because it'll just dump out here and can make it under your tires fairly easily. So I plan to run this line and this whole setup somewhere to the back of the car. I debated just running the hose to my windshield. That way, if the head gasket blew, I'd really know about it, but haven't fully thought that through. Have the wheels off just for some cleaning. Front wheels, I have new tires for them that I need to get mounted on Monday, tomorrow. Car needs a good clean. And the most important part is this clutch, which I've taken apart right now, but I had test fitted it onto a spare block and transmission that's at the shop, and things are very close. It almost fits, except the tops of these fingers contact a little piece or casting in the back of the transmission where actually the shift rod is at, and I'll show you that later. But I have a few ideas on how to make this fit. It's very close, and I think I can make it happen. However, without my transmission in hand, that makes things very difficult. So the transmission, or my transmission I should say, should be here on Wednesday night or Thursday morning. I have somebody that volunteered. Well, I'm paying him a couple bucks. That's delivering a car to Dallas tomorrow, Monday, and he'll be driving back and he'll pick my transmission up and get it to me Wednesday night or Thursday morning. And then I'll be able to really test fit things and see what I need to do to make that clutch fit, make sure the transmission shifts. There's a couple upgrades to the trans I have to take care of, such as a fluid pump and an input shaft speed sensor. So still a lot of things left to do. Okay, today is March 9th. Not a whole lot's changed. We got some new tires and clean front wheels. And honestly, I think that's about all I accomplished on this car. Been working on the Lexus mostly. Still have clutch sitting here, kind of taken apart here because I was doing some measuring. But we are hoping that the transmission shows up probably Thursday, and I'll get to measuring and really hustling. For today, I'm going to do some wiring that I need to do. So the new transmission, well, the same rebuilt transmission, is going to have a fluid pump, which will be mounted somewhere under the car. And it'll be activated most likely at wide open throttle, so over 80% throttle. And I'm going to wire the relay for that. And also the transmission is going to have an input shaft speed sensor that will be mounted on it, which is a Hall effect sensor. I'm going to wire that to the ECU, which will hopefully pick up our custom setup that Joe did to read input shaft speed. That way we can look at input shaft speed versus RPM, and then you'll see how much the clutch is slipping. And that way you know which way to adjust it, whether you add weights, add base pressure, subtract it, whichever. So hopefully it'll be very useful data once we're at the track. So I'm gonna get to wiring. That's probably what I'll do for tonight, since there really isn't much more I can do without the transmission here, and I'll update you tomorrow. So the relay is done being wired in. They're both right there by the roll bar. One is for the fuel pump and one is for the fluid pump for the transmission. And in the ECU, I have it set up to turn on whenever I'm over 60% throttle, and battery volts are over 8, so it's not ever running if the battery's dead, in case I want to test it. But if I floor it, you can see that turning on and hopefully hear it clicking too. So like I said, that'll be for the transmission fluid pump, and I'll show how that's going to work later on, but at least the wiring is somewhat ready when that shows up. Next up, we're going to wire in that input shaft speed sensor. I'm using a Motec Hall effect sensor. Should be 4 wires, drain, sensor ground, signal, and a power wire. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on that. Connect it to this mess of wires down here and run it probably in the center console and through the shifter to go underneath to where that sensor will be. So today's March 10th, the next day, about 10 p.m. and I'm doing a couple measurements I need for my clutch. And my good friend Carl is actually on his way here to drop off the transmission. So luckily I was able to work it out to where he can come here a day early. Even though it's already late, I can still get some measurements I need and knock out a couple things tomorrow instead of using tomorrow to measure. But here's what I got going on right now. So I'm doing a couple measurements, pretty much distances from pressure plate to the fingers where the hydraulic bearing is going to go, block to pressure plate, and so on and so forth. But that's what we got going on right here. So basically I'm trying to measure ahead of time so I know where to install the adjustable hydraulic bearing, and also figuring out what kind of clearance issues I'm running into with the transmission, because this clutch doesn't exactly fit right out of the box. Being a custom setup, never before done at V160, things don't exactly go together easily, but we'll be working on that. And hopefully get everything to go together. Carl just showed up with the transmission. Today's the lucky day. Oh man. The lighting is blinding, but nice. And we got a spare bell housing to help me with some measuring and a couple other things. Let's get this thing out of here. All right, so we did some measuring here, and the problem that I'm running into is that the very tip of the clutch, the very top where the fingers are, hit this nub right here. This is a spare bell that Joe let me borrow, and that nub is where the shift rod goes, so can't just cut it off. However, Joe let me drill a hole in it. I measured the thickness, and that tells me how much I can shave off of it without ruining my transmission and having fluid leaking everywhere. So after some measuring, we're gonna take the grinder to it, file it down a little bit, and give us some extra clearance. And every little bit will help. We'll have to find a little bit more somewhere else, because the amount, according to my math, that we need was what, 5 mil or something? Yeah. Total of 5 more millimeters of clearance. We also have these guys from Powerhouse Racing. I have 2 of these in case I have to use both, but these are 1/8 inch thick. So this combined with that, maybe some other little things, and we should have the clearance that I need. So I may or may not share in the video how we ground this down. So now the distance between this surface and that nub is 108.3 millimeters. And the clearance that I need for that clutch to that nub is 108.68. So I'm missing about 0.3 millimeters, but that spacer that we have should fill that gap, and then might try to get a little bit more clearance elsewhere, but this looks pretty promising for now. All right guys, so here's what we got. My transmission over there, grinded that down about 3.5 millimeters. This is the bell housing that I did not grind down. A spare block that had severe crank walk and has no bearings in it, so I spaced it out to be exactly like my car. And here's where we are with the clearance. Let's see if we can see. Oh, come on. well, hard to see in there, but got about probably 1 millimeter of clearance without any kind of grinding on this transmission. So I think I'll be in good shape, especially since mine is ground down. So that'll give me even more clearance. I'll obviously double check once mine is in there, but I'm pretty happy with that. And that's running this 3 millimeter spacer. The other cool thing to note that a lot of people were concerned with, well, me in particular, but clutch manufacturer and people running similar clutches, is this axis panel on V160 is huge. So not only can I adjust the base pressure, which is going to be that Allen right there that you can see plus minus, but I can also get to these levers, the levers that are, you know, getting really close to contacting. That's actually where you put the weights. So those levers right there with the holes in them that I removed some material off of, you attach weights to them. And the way these clutches work is the faster they spin, the more RPM you have, those weights by centrifugal force pull down on those levers and apply more pressure to the clutch. And then those adjustments right there change the base pressure on the clutch discs. So combination of those two and some tuning is pretty much how these clutches work. By no means am I an expert, I've never used one, but that's the theory behind it from my understanding. So after this, we're gonna make sure that I don't have to extend the pilot bearing. Since we put the spacer on, I want to make sure that the input shaft has the proper support on it. And then slight modification to the drive shaft adapter, so shave that down or mill it down about 3 millimeters, and then test fit everything on my transmission, make sure that that fits. Also a couple things on my trans. So what we have here is the billet center case, which some of you have seen, and then on the bottom of it, Joe has mounted a Hall effect sensor. So this sensor has the proper spacing to read, I believe he said it was the countershaft gear. So we're hoping that it picks up those teeth properly and I can calibrate it to read input shaft speed RPM. So that'll be awesome to see the clutch slip and fine tune things. And then right here used to be a fill hole, the OEM fill hole. Joe has set up a contraption to basically spray the forward gears, or not the forward gears, but the gears up here with fluid. So when you're accelerating, all the fluid rushes towards the back, and that's the big problem with these transmissions. There's a bar spray tube going up that'll be spraying the gears, and that's the relay that I ordered in, which is for a pump that'll be hooked up to those. And it looks something like this. So here's a little filter for it. In case this transmission eats some teeth, I don't ruin the pump at the same time. But that's going to be the fluid pump. A couple fittings in here, a bracket that Joe made to mount it under the car. And what do we got here? Shifter stuff. Joe's actually overnighting me a modified shifter he made that has some custom parts on it with a lot less play. And we just have some AN line in here for the fluid pump. But all this stuff will be going back together hopefully soon. It's about 1 in the morning on March 10th, Wednesday. So lots of stuff done. I'm pretty happy with fitment so far. So tomorrow we'll continue installing stuff, testing stuff, and we'll update you then. All right, it's the next day, March 11th, 10 p.m., 11 p.m. Been working on this for a couple hours after work, so unfortunately I can't work on it all day because I still have to do my day job. But basically we're doing some math and we got the bearing installed. So this is a Tilton hydraulic throw bearing. Kronos makes that adapter plate for the V160. And we set it up for 6.38-ish millimeters of bearing clearance and that's what the clutch manufacturer wanted. Long story short, I measured it on my block, but this is also a test block that I set up to be very close as far as crankshaft location goes. So measured the distance from here to here, and then you measure from here down to the fingers, subtract those two, and then you measure from this face to the bearing, do some math, and you can set this up to the exact clearance that you need. And this can rotate and go in or out, and then this bolt holds it in place. You have your bleeder line here as well as the supply line. So those should be set up properly because this transmission is kind of on its side. Also, remove the pilot bearing on the car because I needed to make a custom / space it out just about 3 millimeters. That way it has proper support for this input shaft, mainly because of this spacer that we're going to be running. I also have this piece here. So this is a little adapter plate for my drive shaft. And since I'm moving the transmission back 3 millimeters, I'm going to machine this down probably 4 millimeters actually. My drive shaft was always very tight going in, so I'm probably just going to do 4 millimeters. It's got enough movement in it to where it'll be fine. So I have a buddy who will do this at his house / machine shop and make it look just like this, except 4 millimeters thinner. All right, have everything mocked up. My transmission, 3 millimeter plate, spare block with major crank walk that I adjusted so it's semi-close. And the clutch is in here. And this, I even installed a little weight on one of the fingers. I installed it right here through this hole, so that's great because I don't have to pull the transmission. And I think I mentioned already the base pressure can be adjusted here with an Allen without pulling the trans. And that spot where it wasn't clearing, it's kind of hard to see, but that finger right there clears it. And even if I rotate it to where the weight is, that's pretty solid too. There we go. So probably got up a 2 mil of clearance. And I was thinking of shaving those weights / bolts down a little bit just for extra clearance, but it looks pretty solid. Pretty happy with how this turned out. So now that everything's mocked up, it should be ready to get installed in the car. The only thing left to do is bolt this to the car, well, install the pilot bearing, put the clutch on the car. Then I have to set up the clutch properly with measuring the height of this plate. And there's a tool for that. It uses these holes here, but I'll show you that later. So it's Friday, March 12th, and just got off work. I'm driving to a friend's house to pick up my drive shaft adapter. He's actually the one I bought my Lexus from, and he was able to machine down the adapter for me about 4 millimeters to make up for the spacing that I did to the transmission. And then an extra millimeter just because the drive shaft was always tight. But once I grabbed that, I'm headed back home, grab some dinner, and start working and putting the trans in, putting the clutch in, torquing everything down, rechecking all the clearances, and might even fire the car up tonight, we'll see. This is a solid operation. So adapter is done. Milled, not milled. Well, I guess you can call it milled off the face of it, even though you did it in a lathe. Those are the dimensions. This piece should work out. All right, so pilot bearing's in. The next thing we're gonna do is get this flywheel bolted up and start measuring everything. But this is the gauge that I have to use to correctly set the height of this plate, or the pressure plate. And it's already set up for the proper height. You just have to make sure it all matches up. And once it's fully torqued, that not only are they all even, but at the correct height. So that's up next. We got Carl changing the diff fluid. Got this transmission ready to go. Secured the lines a little bit. Gonna secure this one out here when the time comes. And then we'll hopefully pop the trans in. All right, so it's Friday night. May or may not be Saturday already. But here's where we ended up for the night. We got the trans bolted in. All the bolts are on. The mount's not on because it got bent in shipping, I believe. So I need to take that to the shop and unbend it. We have the fluid pump mounted. Just need to make the lines and run those. Obviously, get the drive shaft in, the shifter assembled. But pretty good progress. We changed the diff fluid. Thanks to Carl and Andrew for helping out. But I'm gonna call it a night for now. All right, we're back. It's Saturday, March 13th. Just got off work. Managed to straighten this bracket out, which got bent in shipping. So this is the transmission mount. We'll get that on today. Continue with the things I said last night. And I also want to point out that I grabbed maybe 5-6 shirts. I know a couple of you guys asked me for a shirt. They are going to be first come, first serve. Just very basic logo, and then a small one up here from National Speed. So stop by the car, check it out, say hello, and you can get a shirt if you're interested. I have a couple different sizes, but like I said, only a couple shirts. So Carl's gonna come over, help me with the rest of this stuff here, and hopefully we'll see it fire up tonight. All right, so we've been working here, kind of hard to work and film, so we got the pump mounted and the lines ran. So got them running right here. And then that's the supply line. And then it feeds to the side of the trans right there. So that's buttoned up now. Next, we're gonna bleed the clutch, fill the trans with fluid, and probably fire it up. Up for the day, but we got quite a bit done. As you saw, the car fires up and runs. We now have exhaust on, drive shaft in, wired in the input shaft speed sensor, just haven't tested that yet. We got wheels, or at least rear wheels, back on. We have the wires ran right here for the fluid pump, just need to attach them to the relay. What else we got? Or not have, I guess. We need to finish setting up the shifter. It's pretty late. Can't even remember what we need to do, but made a short list here. Let's see. Fill the tranny. Yeah, so we put in some temporary fluid in it. And drain that out, so I need to fill the transmission, torque the wheels, and do some driving and see how it shifts. All right, Sunday the 14th, putting this liquid gold in the car, probably do an oil change, front wheels, test some wiring, and I'm gonna try to go to the track, but we'll keep you posted how today goes. So it's now Monday, about 12 o'clock. I didn't do too many updates yesterday, Sunday, mostly because I felt like I was running out of time and things were not working out as I planned. Mostly the issue I was having, at least during street testing, is higher RPM shifting, and a couple good people warned me about that using this clutch. I was stubborn and thought I could make it work. I'm still trying to make it work. And maybe I can, maybe I can't. We did a couple adjustments last night and it seemed to get better. However, without more testing, especially on the track, it's going to be pretty difficult to figure out whether or not it's going to shift well. The other thing I'm doing is trying to figure out two different variables. I mean, this trans is fresh, so maybe the assembly is not perfect, and that's why the transmission doesn't work as great as I thought it would. But I'm gonna do a couple more adjustments today, Monday, load the car up, load the trailer up, and head on down and do some test passes. I have a feeling I won't be setting any personal bests or breaking any records, but we're gonna go out and have some fun, see what we can do. If I have to granny shift the thing, then I will. I think the launching will be improved. It feels good on launches, but shifting it's gonna be a different story, so I guess we'll see how it goes. Either way, a couple buddies going with me, so we're gonna have a good time. Come by, say hello, ask me how it's going. If I look super frustrated, don't mind me.
So we are adjusting his clutch stop so that way we can get the right throw to get the right clearance between the clutch and the steels down there on the clutch disc. So it looks like we're all good now. We've just added some washers to get the right height.
Alright, so that test drive was much better than the previous ones. I am happy with what we did because I can shift gears and the clutch fully disengages, so I feel a lot better about this whole trip now, and it's been pretty difficult and stressful at times, I'm not gonna lie, so this feels good.